Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. He is the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and brilliantly represents the second district of Wisconsin. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, as in representative, Rep Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. Congressman, great to see you.
Great to see you, Tom.
Thanks for joining us today. So it's an absolute circus over there in the House of Representatives. What is going on, this week that you think that our viewers and listeners need to know about?
I think the top two things this week, the top one by far is Trumpcare. The fact that they don't know if they have the votes yet for tomorrow. This has been an unprecedented rush to try to pass something under the guise of health care. But I would argue, really, this is one of the largest transfers of wealth we've had in modern history. It's a $600 billion tax cut to the wealthiest in this country, insurance companies, big pharma. And they're having all kinds of resistance in the Republican Party on this for a lot of different reasons. But in the end, this is a bill that not only is it really just a giant tax break and it's under the guise of health care, but the fact that, if you're an older American, you're going to pay significantly more for less health care. And if you're on Medicaid, you're more likely to lose the benefits that you have. So 24 million people will likely lose health care if this thing passes the way it is. And I think, we're all watching what can happen leading into tomorrow's vote. The other thing I think of significance was Monday when FBI Director Comey said a couple of things that were interesting. One, that absolutely no way President Obama was tapping the wires of Donald Trump, as Donald Trump continues to put out there. And, we're actually right now leading a letter that we're going to be releasing probably tomorrow or Friday that is demanding an apology. It's time that this guy, apologized to the former president for something so outrageous. But also they said that they're actually investigating the Trump campaign and possible collusion with the Russian government in what happened in the election. So I think that's really significant too. So those are a couple of the highlights this week. A lot of other things going on, but the vote tomorrow is probably what everyone's talking about the most.
Yeah, if Donald Trump turns out to be a Manchurian candidate, that if you're watching Rachel Maddow, I'm not sure if she's gone full Alex Jones or if she's onto something huge here. But if that was the case, it is breathtaking. And if it's not the case, then the Democratic Party has burned through a lot of political capital, when they could be chasing other things. But I'm just astonished by the whole thing.
I'll tell you, someone who's read classified reports and hearing, and I'm also hearing things at the same time you are, as some of the journalists are breaking it. Yeah. There's just a whole lot of questions at minimum that need to be answered, and the fact that now we know there is an ongoing investigation. I mean, that's pretty significant.
Well, and now you've got senators. I think Chuck Schumer came out and said this yesterday, that just like the Republicans said, well, there needs to be a rule that if the president's in the last year of his administration, he can't really appoint somebody to the Supreme Court. And Schumer is saying, wouldn't an even more important rule be that if the president is under investigation by the FBI, that he can't appoint somebody to the Supreme Court, particularly somebody who might ultimately rule on his case if he gets prosecuted, convicted, and appeals it to the Supreme Court. And that seems even more cogent than, it's just his last year in office.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, that's why I think it just, it's such an interesting time to be here, Tom. I mean, literally from week to week when we talk, things, so many new things come up. And, this has barely been, 60 days of the Trump presidency.
Yeah. Now, with regard to Trumpcare, I've been calling it Chumpcare because, Trump stands in front of these big crowds like in Kentucky and whatnot, and they all thinks, and probably half of them are on Medicaid. I mean, they're these working people who are working minimum wage jobs. They qualify for Medicaid, particularly in Kentucky, where they expanded Medicare or Medicaid. And they've got to be chumps saying, yeah, tear it down, but I realize that, in the House of Representatives, you've got some Republicans who are following, and, mostly the cokehead, what I call the cokehead caucus. They call themselves the Freedom Caucus, I think. And but they're all funded by the Koch network in larger or smaller amounts. And David Koch ran for president in 2008 on a platform that said, and I quote, We urge the repeal, we favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid. We oppose any compulsory insurance or any tax-supported plan to provide health services. We also favor the deregulation of the medical insurance industry. And then they went on to Social Security. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. That's, I don't think David Koch has changed politically since then, and the Koch network is funding people who are saying that. You had Mick Mulvaney, the head of the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, who on one of the Sunday shows last Sunday said, well, most people don't think of Social Security disability, which, by the way, is between a quarter and a third of the entire program. Most people don't think of Social Security disability as Social Security. And there's a lot of waste there. We could cut that, or words to that effect. What are your thoughts about the Republicans' apparent plan now to start cutting Social Security as well as destroying Medicare and Medicaid through this Obamacare repeal?
And Paul Ryan this week also said that they've been talking about doing this to Medicaid since he was at Keggers, right? So clearly this is something that they've been planning for a very, very long time. And they're finally, as you said, getting a chance to. So the problem they're having is some people on the right think this doesn't go far enough. Some of the moderates are afraid that it's going to have an impact back home because it's going to. 24 million people losing health insurance could affect them in their future elections. And there's just a variety of interesting things going on. So Carlos Carbello, who represents the bottom of Florida, the southern Miami and the Keys, in committee voted for this dog. And now that Ileana Ross-Layton is saying she's going to vote against it, who represents a neighboring district in Miami, suddenly now he's going, well, I don't like some of the changes done by that other committee, so I might vote against it. And someone else on that other committee now is saying, I voted for it, but now I might vote against it because I didn't like the action on the other committee. Everyone's like kind of scrambling on this thing. And, in the end, this isn't a health care bill, Tom. I mean, this is, really, the more and more I look at it, this is just a backdoor way, a Trojan horse. And I just gave a speech on the floor this morning that this is nothing more than a Trojan horse in order to try to do the largest transfer of wealth we've seen in recent history from, the average person to literally the top 1 or 2% in insurance companies, pharma companies. And that's, I think, what this is ultimately really about. And then plus they do want to do all these cuts in order to fund even additional tax cuts to those people.
Darlene, watching Free Speech TV in Grand Prairie, Texas. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Congressman. I have a problem with Ivanka Trump getting security clearance. She vacations with Putin's girlfriend. I mean, isn't there some kind of problem with that? I mean, she could be the leaks.
That's interesting.
I mean, I was outraged because I'm like, what in the world? She's not getting a salary, but she's going to get security clearance, and she's best friends with Putin's girlfriend.
Darlene, I think obviously there's a closeness to the Trump family, and that's the people he trusts, I guess, besides Steve Bannon, the most. And, but it should be of trouble. I mean, they're still in their business involvements within the Trump enterprises. And the more we continue to bring them in, it just, it doesn't strike the way we've ever really operated, at least that I can remember in this country. And I do have concerns. And, the fact that they've got office space and security clearance and all these other things, but they're not technically an employee. Well, we all know the difference on that. And they're still having all the business interactions that the Trump family has because they're not going to separate like every other president has. So there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. And then, her husband, Jared Kushner, we know, recently there was a real estate deal where he's going to make about $400 million just off of the surplus on that deal. And
from the Chinese.
Yeah, from the Chinese. And he's also meeting at the Trump Tower with the Russian ambassador, but not through the front door. And, this is all like a kind of a B-grade novel, that someone put together and, you're kind of reading, and unfortunately we're living through it.
Yeah, I think Frederick Forsyth could have done a better job. John in Seattle, watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Hey, John.
Yeah, Mr. Pocan, I have a concern of Donald Trump's cabinet going to, if they become convicted in a trial, can Donald Trump pardon his cabinet? Because he has the power to do that. and so they can get off. And then my other question is, what's going to happen with Social Security's disability?
Well, thank you, John. Those pardons were done by Reagan, Bush, and Ford, as I recall, more than just the president.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not putting this out there for a rumor, but I mean, just assuming the Attorney General, for example, got caught up in something. I mean, yeah, if Donald Trump was still the president, he has that ability to do that, or anyone else in the administration. So that's a concern. Although these days, this seems to be going maybe all the way, to the top. We just don't know yet. So absolutely, that could happen. And I think what you've got to remember is, and I used to be on the Budget Committee, and Paul Ryan and I share a county. We have neighboring districts. He has always wanted to privatize Social Security and voucherize Medicare. So this is what their real goals are. So while he's talking about, since he's been at Keggers, wanting to destroy Medicaid, and he's publicly put out Republican versions of the budgets that offer privatization and voucherization schemes for these other programs, we just have to understand that this is what they ultimately want to do. Today, it's the big tax cuts and taking away health care. The next thing could be, the tax reform and more tax cuts for the wealthiest. You're going to see a little bit of everything with these guys.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a second.